Chapter 4. The Workhouse. Jim and his mother walked for most of the day, but they made very slow progress. They rested a bit near the statue of a man on a horse, and after a very short distance they had to stop again for Mrs. Jarvis to scoop water from a fountain. And on they went, trudging and stopping, until Jim's mother could go no further. She put her arms round Jim and pressed her head down onto his shoulder. "God help you, Jim," she said. It seemed to Jim that she was simply tired then of walking, and that she'd decided to go to sleep there on the pavement. He squatted down beside her, glad of the rest, feeling dizzy and tired himself. And he was aware of a worry of voices around him, like flies buzzing. Someone shook him and he opened his eyes. "Where do you live?" a voice said. Jim sat up. Already it was growing dark. There were people around him, and some were kneeling by his mother trying to lift her. "We used to live in a cottage," said Jim. "We had a cow and some hens." "Where do you live now?" It was a different voice, a bit sharper than the last one. Jim tried to remember the name of the street where they'd rented a room in Mr. Spink's big house, and he couldn't. He couldn't understand why his mother wouldn't wake up. He looked round for his bundle and saw that his wooden horse had gone. He clutched Lizzie's old boots. "You haven't got nowhere?" the same voice asked. Jim shook his head. Someone was doing something to his mother, rubbing her hands, it looked like, and dabbing her face with a shawl. "Get them to the workhouse," someone said. "There's nothing we can do for her." "I'm not taking them there," another voice said. "Prison would be better than that. Tell them we caught the boys stealing and let them put them both in prison." "Someone stole my horse," Jim heard himself say. He couldn't keep his voice steady. "I didn't steal anything." "Give him his horse back," someone said. "It's all he's got, ain't it? A pair of boots what's too big for him and a wooden horse. Give it back." There was a burst of laughter, and some children broke away from the group and ran off. The next minute there was a shouting from the far end of the street, and the people who had been crouching round Jim and his mother stood up and moved away. He heard other voices and looked up to see two policemen. "Get up," one of the policemen ordered. Jim struggled to his feet. "And you, get up," the other one said to Jim's mother. She lay quite still. The first policeman waved his hand, and a boy with a cart ran up. Between them, they lifted Jim's mother onto it. Jim watched, afraid. "Take 'em to the workhouse," the policeman said. "Let 'em die there if they have to die." The boy began to run then, head down, skidding on the snowy road, weaving the cart in and out of the carriages, and Jim ran anxiously behind. They came at last to a massive stone building with iron railings round it. Weary people slouched there, begging for food. The boy stopped the cart outside the huge iron gates and pulled the bell. Jim could hear it clanging in the distance. At last the gates were pulled open by a porter who glared out at them. "2 more for you," said the boy. "1 for the infirmary, 1 for the school." The porter led them into a yard. There, on the steps on each side of the main door, stood a man and a woman, as straight and thin and waxy-faced as a pair of church candles, staring down at them. The boy held out his hand and was given a small coin, and the master and matron bent down and lifted Jim's mother off the cart and carried her into the house. The boy pushed his cart out and the porter clanged the gate shut. The matron poked her head sharply round the door. "Get in," she told Jim, and pulled him through. "You come and get scrubbed and cropped." The doors groaned. They were in a long corridor, gloomy with candle shadow. In front of them a man trudged with Jim's mother across his shoulder. "Where's Ma going?" Jim asked. "Where's she going? Infirmary, that's where she's going. Wants feeding and medicine, no doubt, and nothing to buy it with neither." "Can I go with her?" "Go with her? A big strong boy like you? You cannot. If you're good, Mr. Sissons might let you see her tomorrow." "Good mind." Know what good means? She pulled Jim along the corridor and into a huge green room where boys sat in silence, staring at each other and at the bare walls. They all watched Jim as he was led through the room and out into the yard. Joseph, the matron called, and a bent man shuffled after her. His head hung below his shoulders like a stumpy bird. He helped her to strip off Jim's clothes and to sluice him down with icy water from the pump. Then Jim was pulled into rough, itchy clothes, and his hair was tugged and jagged at with a blunt pair of scissors until his scalp felt as if it had been torn to pieces. He let it all happen to him. He was too frightened to resist. All he wanted was to be with his mother. He was led back into a huge hall and told to join the queue of silent boys there. They stood there with their heads bowed and with bowls in their hands. There were hundreds and hundreds of people in the room, all sitting at long tables, all eating in silence. The only sound was the scraping of knives and forks and the noise of chewing and gulping. All the benches faced the same way. Mr. Sisson stood on a raised box at the end of the room, watching everybody as they waited for their food. Jim was given a ladle of broth and a corner of bread. "I don't want anything," he started to say, and was pushed along the queue. He followed the boy in front of him and sat on one of the benches. He glanced